The Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez is hosting a raft of left-wing world leaders, including the presidents of Brazil, Colombia and South Africa. Our EU editor, Maria Tadeo, is there for us and just before the show sent us this update.
Well, good morning indeed, Marit. We are in Barcelona, where the Spanish government is hosting a convention today and tomorrow, bringing together heads of states, intellectuals and activists of what it calls as the progressive social democratic world. In a way, you could argue this is the opposite, the complete opposite of the CPAC convention led in multiple occasions by President Trump. And of course, it's not a secret that the Spanish Prime Minister and President Trump have clashed on pretty much every subject, including the war in Iran, which this country, Spain, says is completely illegal and will set the region on fire. Now, in terms of today, I spoke with Teresa Ribera. She is the Executive Vice President of the European Commission, also a former minister in the Spanish government. And I began by asking her in our interview, why is it that the world needs progressive ideas, but also has the European left lost the working class because of a disconnect between their vision and their needs? Let's take a look.
My conviction is that we need to think on how to solve the problems. So it is not against anyone, but to be fair and solid on the type of responses that we are proposing and that we are playing and walking the path. So I could not say. Obviously, there is a political view that is pretty different from those political views being supported by the most conservative voices. But the main intention is to say what we want that probably provides a different view of the things that others do want.
But since you talk about the idea of progressive Europe, some would say the left has lost the European working class because it doesn't have the right priorities. I wonder, is this also a moment where the left needs to do a form of soul-searching too?
On the contrary, I have the impression that climate action is providing opportunities to people that could feel the harm, the penalties of not taking climate action. Energy transition means counting on sources of energy that do not create additional problems and that allow people to have lower bills. So it is part of the discussion that has been distorted in purpose to prevent action in those fields that could help people to do things and to count on the high quality of life.
Over the weekend, there was a very important election in Hungary in which the Hungarians voted for change. Prime Minister Viktor Orbán will be leaving office after 16 years. He was obviously a big ally of President Trump in Europe. I wonder, what does that election, that result, that call for change say to you when it comes to Europe at this stage?
We've seen that Hungarians did decide that they wanted to be Europeans, that they wanted to fight for their rights, that they thought that this was important in terms of democracy, and they decided to vote massively. Massively. It was not a tight election. It was very clear, the result. So I think that it shows to what extent this narrative against Europe, against working together, against being united, against the defense of the civil rights and the integration is not something that can win in the middle long run. On the contrary, it probably exposes the limitations and the harm that people could feel in the absence of this joint forces, joint effort of the European nations to develop the European program.
Just a final point on this. There's been reports now that the Commission, and obviously this now touches the core of your portfolio, this is a massive job that you have when it comes to the competition laws in the EU. And these reports suggest that there is now a plan to massively dilute some of the regulation to allow for mergers to create major European champions. Is that the case? Are you preparing for this?
We are entering into the last phase to adopt an updated version of our merger guidelines. So we have already a very sound draft. After having heard everybody, we know that we need to update our reality to today's economy. But that doesn't mean forgetting the core bulk of our mission, which is protecting consumers from abuses of dominance. So this means that we may take into consideration innovation, long-term sustainability, resilience. This means that we need to be ready to understand the global context and the impact in the national and the domestic economy. But this doesn't mean forgetting about the importance of keeping the level playing field.
So you're not, just as a final question on this, because it's important, so you're not preparing major deregulation to allow companies to come together? That is not in the pipeline?
No, of course not.
And I say this because you have said in the past that too much simplification at times has made things confusing. So your fundamentals is still to say deregulation would be bad for the EU?
This is not a product to deregulate. This is a product to modernize and to be transparent of the criteria that we will be using to assess when a merger is pro-competitive and provides positive effects to the economy, and when it is a real risk and it is not proven that the operation does not comply with what it is being said, either if it is innovation or sustainability. So I think that it allows much more innovation and much more security for all, but at the very same time, it is quite clear that we will remain defending the interests of the consumers and not accepting whatever as a blank check.